Parents called me a broke loser for 6 years, and my boyfriend dumped me. Now they're begging me for money after finding out I'm worth $47 million. This is going to be long, but I need to get this off my chest because what happened last week has been the most satisfying moment of my entire life. Also, yeah, this is a throwaway because some of these people know my main account. For those asking for proof in advance, obviously I can't post bank statements or business documents for privacy reasons, but the mods can verify what they need to verify. Trust me, this story is 100% real and I have receipts for everything. I'm 31, female now, but this story really starts when I was 23 and fresh out of college with a business administration degree from Arizona State. Nothing fancy, just decent grades and a mountain of student debt like everyone else. My GPA was 3.4, which my family constantly reminded me was respectable but not impressive. My family was always obsessed with money and status. My dad, Robert Chen, runs a small accounting firm called Chen and Associates that does pretty well for itself, but nothing crazy. He's got maybe 12 employees and handles taxes for local businesses and some wealthy families in Scottsdale. My mom, Linda, works as a nurse supervisor at Banner Health, making decent money, but always stressed about hospital politics and overtime. They're comfortable middle class, drive decent cars, live in a nice 4-bedroom house in Ahwatukee with a pool, take vacations to San Diego every summer, but they were always obsessed with appearances and what other people thought. Every conversation somehow turned into comparing our family to the neighbors, my dad's clients, or my mom's coworkers. My older sister Jessica married this finance guy named Derek when she was 24. Derek works at some mid-tier investment firm called Southwest Capital Management, making maybe $120,000, and acts like he's Warren Buffett reincarnated. Drives a leased BMW 3 Series, wears expensive suits from Men's Warehouse, talks constantly about his portfolio diversification and market strategies at every family gathering. My parents absolutely worship this guy because he fits their narrow definition of what success looks like. Derek closed another major account today, my dad would announce at dinner, like Derek had just won the Nobel Prize. Real estate investment trust for a client with $800,000 in assets. My mom would beam like Derek was her own son. Such a smart young man, so driven. Then there's me, Shirley. I was always the quiet, creative kid who spent too much time sketching product designs in my notebooks and reading business books instead of playing sports or socializing. While Jessica was doing dance classes and beauty pageants, winning little plastic trophies that my parents displayed like Olympic medals, I was learning about supply chains and manufacturing processes from library books. My parents saw this as antisocial behavior rather than valuable interests. They'd find me reading about logistics management or product development and shake their heads with disappointment. Shirley needs to learn how to network, my dad would say to my mom, like I wasn't sitting right there. Product development is fine as a hobby, but real success comes from relationships and sales ability. You can't make money sitting alone reading books. She's too introverted, my mom would agree. How's she going to succeed in business if she can't even make small talk at parties? When I graduated college in 2015, I couldn't find a decent job immediately. The job market was still pretty tough, especially for new grads without family connections or impressive internships. I sent out probably 200 applications over 4 months and got maybe 12 interviews. Most companies wanted 3 years of experience for entry-level positions, which made no sense. I finally ended up taking a position at a small logistics company called Desert Transport Solutions, making $42,000 annually while living in a terrible apartment complex called The Palms, with 2 roommates who left dirty dishes everywhere and played video games until 3:00 a.m. every night. The apartment had brown carpet that looked like it hadn't been cleaned since the 1990s, a kitchen with appliances that barely worked, and thin walls where you could hear every conversation from neighboring units. My family's reaction was predictably disappointing. See, this is what happens when you don't apply yourself, my mom would say during our weekly family dinners. Derek had 3 job offers before he even graduated because he worked properly and interned at prestigious firms. You should have studied finance or law, my dad would add. Business administration is too general. You need specialization to command respect in the marketplace. But the real problem wasn't my family's constant criticism. The real problem was my boyfriend at the time, Jack. Jack Rodriguez and I met during our junior year at ASU. He was studying marketing with a minor in communications and came from serious money. His dad, Carlos Rodriguez, owned a chain of successful car dealerships across the Phoenix metro area, Rodriguez Auto Group. You've probably seen their commercials on local TV with the jingle, "Rodriguez has the deals that make you smile." Jack was used to a lifestyle I couldn't even imagine. Designer watches that cost more than my monthly groceries. Weekly trips to expensive restaurants in Scottsdale where a single entree cost $45. Spontaneous shopping sprees that cost more than my monthly rent. Vacations to Cabo and Vegas funded entirely by Daddy's credit card. His apartment near campus was a luxury 2-bedroom that his parents paid for, complete with granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, walk-in closets, and a view of Tempe Town Lake that probably added $500 to the monthly rent. When we first started dating, I thought he was just a little high maintenance, but basically good-hearted. He was absolutely gorgeous, about 6'1", dark hair with perfect fades that cost $70 every few weeks, a fitness model build from his personal trainer. The kind of guy who always looked like he stepped out of an Instagram photo shoot. I was completely smitten and honestly way out of my league in terms of looks and social status. But Jack had very specific ideas about what his post-graduation life should look like. He wanted a partner who could go to expensive steakhouses every weekend, exchange pricey gifts for random occasions, take exotic vacations, drive nice cars, live in upscale neighborhoods. When I was making $42,000 and splitting rent 3 ways in a complex where the pool was always broken, that lifestyle wasn't exactly feasible. It's not about the money, he'd say, which is what people always say when it's absolutely about the money. It's about ambition. It's about having goals and working towards something better. I want a partner who wants more out of life. The constant comparison started pretty quickly and got worse over time. His friend Sarah was dating a pharmaceutical sales rep named Brad who made $85,000 and drove a new Mustang. His friend Brittany's boyfriend was a real estate agent who had his own Escalade and took her to Napa Valley for weekends. His friend Ashley was engaged to a guy named Connor who owned a CrossFit gym and was already talking about opening a second location. "I just don't understand why you're satisfied with so little," Jack would say when I'd suggest we stay in and order pizza instead of going to some overpriced steakhouse where appetizers cost $18. "Don't you want more for yourself, for us? Don't you want to build something meaningful?" The worst part was that he'd say these things in this calm, concerned voice, like he was genuinely worried about my lack of ambition, rather than just disappointed that I couldn't fund his lifestyle expectations. The breaking point came about 8 months into my logistics job. Jack wanted to go to his friend Kyle's bachelor party in Miami. The weekend would cost about $200 per person after flights, hotels, clubs, spa treatments, and expensive dinners. I had maybe $800 in my checking account after paying bills, and my credit cards were already carrying balances from trying to keep up with Jack's expectations. "Then figure it out," he said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Put it on a credit card. Ask your parents for help. Pick up extra shifts. This is important to me." "I'm not going into debt for a party," I told him, "and I'm definitely not asking my parents for money to fund your vacation." "God, Shirley, you're so cheap." It's like you don't even care about my happiness or the things that matter to me. We had a huge fight that ended with him storming out of my apartment, slamming the door so hard that my roommate came out to ask if everything was okay. The next day, I found out through social media that he'd gone to the party anyway, posting photos with friends and acting like nothing had happened. When he came back from Miami with a perfect tan and hundreds of Instagram shots, he acted like things were fine, but they obviously weren't. He started canceling our dates, being distant and cold when we did hang out, always on his phone, texting other people. I found out he was officially seeing someone else when my buddy Jake spotted Jack having dinner at some upscale restaurant in Old Town Scottsdale with a woman named Lisa. The breakup conversation was absolutely brutal and happened in my crappy apartment while my roommates were home, so they probably heard everything. "I just think we want different things," Jack said. sitting on my secondhand couch that had a visible stain from when my roommate spilled salsa during a Super Bowl party. You're content with mediocrity, and I'm not. I'm working towards something better, I protested. This job is just temporary while I figure out my next move. I'm learning the business, making connections. He actually laughed. Not a mean laugh, but worse, a pitying laugh. Shirley, you've been saying that for months. Lisa and I see eye to eye. She has ambition and drive. She fits the life I want. So this is about money. It's about potential, he said, grabbing his designer wallet. Some people have it, some people don't. I'm sorry, but I need to be with someone who's going somewhere in life. We're both 23 years old. How can you already know someone's potential? Because some people think big and take risks, and other people make excuses and settle for whatever's comfortable. He stood up and headed toward the door. I hope you figure things out, Shirley. I really do. But I can't wait around for you to grow up. The worst part, my family basically agreed with his assessment when I told them about the breakup. I went to my parents' house the next Sunday for our regular family dinner, expecting at least some sympathy or support. Instead, I got a lecture about personal responsibility and relationship management. Jack was good for you, my mom said while serving her famous pot roast. He pushed you to be better and think bigger. Maybe you should consider what he said instead of just feeling sorry for yourself. He was a gold digger who wanted me to go into debt to fund his lifestyle, I said. He was realistic about what he wanted in a partner, my dad replied, cutting his meat with surgical precision. A man like that has options. You need to ask yourself why he'd choose someone else over you. My sister Jessica was even worse. She and Derek had been married for about a year at this point and were clearly the golden couple of the family. Jack was way out of your league anyway, Jessica said matter-of-factly. Lisa's actually successful. She comes from money, and they make sense together. They just bought a house in Paradise Valley for $750,000. Cash down payment. Maybe this is a wake-up call, Derek added, adjusting his expensive watch. You can't expect to attract quality men when you're not bringing quality value to the table. It's basic economics. I sat there listening to my own family explain why my ex-boyfriend was right to dump me for someone with more money. Derek continued with his unsolicited advice. You know what your problem is, he said, warming to his subject like he was delivering a TED Talk. You have a scarcity mindset. You think small. You need to think bigger. Take some calculated risks. Put yourself out there in the marketplace. Easy for you to say, I muttered. Your dad got you that job. Derek's father was a partner at the investment firm and had basically handed him his position after college. But Derek acted like he'd built his career through pure merit and hard work. Connections matter, Derek said smugly. But you have to leverage them properly. You can't just expect opportunities to fall into your lap. My mom nodded approvingly. Derek's right. You need to be more proactive about your career development and more realistic about your dating prospects. Jessica added, maybe focus on guys who are more appropriate for your situation. I left that dinner feeling completely defeated. My own family had essentially told me that I wasn't good enough for my ex-boyfriend and that I should lower my standards in every area of life. But here's the thing. They weren't entirely wrong about me being stuck and thinking small. I was working a dead-end job, living in a crappy apartment, and had no clear plan for improving my situation. I just wasn't going to follow their advice about how to fix it. Instead, I decided to disappear from their radar and build something in complete secrecy. After the breakup and the family intervention, I made a decision that changed everything. I was going to build something significant, but I was going to do it quietly. No updates to family, no bragging on social media, no asking for advice or support, just pure, focused work. First, I moved out of the shared apartment and got a tiny studio in a sketchy part of Central Phoenix for $650 a month. The neighborhood wasn't great, lots of parking lots, pawn shops, and fast food restaurants. But the rent was cheap, and nobody I knew would ever visit. My furniture consisted of a mattress on the floor, a desk from Craigslist, and a folding chair I found on the street that someone was throwing away. I looked like a broke college student, which was exactly what everyone expected to see. But while they thought I was spiraling into poverty and depression, I was actually laser-focused on opportunity identification. I kept the logistics job for steady income and health insurance, but started researching business opportunities during every spare moment. I was working 70 to 80 hours a week between my day job and my research, but keeping completely quiet about it. The idea came from my time at Desert Transport Solutions. I noticed how incredibly inefficient small businesses were at sourcing products. They'd pay ridiculous markups, sometimes 300 to 400% above wholesale, because they didn't know how to find manufacturers directly or were too intimidated to deal with international suppliers. For example, a local restaurant owner was paying $45 for specialty kitchen tools that I could source directly from manufacturers for $12. A boutique clothing store was paying $80 for items that cost $15 to produce. The margins were absolutely insane if you could cut out the middlemen and connect buyers directly with producers. I started small, connecting local businesses with overseas suppliers and taking a modest commission for facilitating the transactions. It wasn't glamorous work. I'd spend hours researching factories in China and Vietnam, negotiating prices through email and broken English phone calls, coordinating shipments and customs paperwork. My first client was a local coffee shop owner named Maria, who was paying way too much for specialty ceramic mugs. She was getting them from a distributor in Los Angeles who was charging $18 per mug for items that looked identical to ones I found online for much less. I found a manufacturer in Guangzhou who could produce the same quality mugs with custom logos for 60% less, including shipping costs. My commission on that first deal was $340, which doesn't sound like much, but it was more than I made in a week at my day job and proved the concept worked. Word spread slowly through referrals. The coffee shop owner told a friend who owned a gift shop. The gift shop owner mentioned it to someone who ran a small restaurant chain. Within 6 months, I had 15 regular clients and was making an extra $2,000 to $3,000 per month. By the end of year 1, I was making more from my side business than from my logistics job. By month 18, I quit Desert Transport Solutions and went full-time on my own venture. But here's where my strategy got interesting. Instead of celebrating or telling anyone about my success, I actually started looking even more broke than before. I kept the terrible studio apartment, continued driving my 2003 Honda Civic with the dented door and faded paint, dressed like I shopped exclusively at thrift stores and clearance racks. Meanwhile, I was saving and reinvesting almost everything. My total living expenses were maybe $2,000 a month, and I was banking the rest. My family saw me driving the beat-up car and assumed I was barely scraping by on unemployment or odd jobs. "Shirley is really struggling," I heard my mom tell her sister during a family barbecue I reluctantly attended. "She won't even ask for help. It's like she's given up on herself." "It's sad," Derek said, standing by the grill in his polo shirt and designer sunglasses. "But not everyone can handle the pressure of real business." I smiled and nodded and kept building my empire in complete secrecy. The beauty of my business model was that it was almost invisible. I worked from my laptop, communicated through email and messaging apps, and met clients at coffee shops or their offices. Nobody knew how much money was flowing through my operation because everything looked casual and small scale. By year 2, I had over 40 regular clients and had started developing relationships with manufacturers who trusted me enough to offer exclusive deals. But more importantly, I began developing my own products. Year 2 was when things really exploded in ways I hadn't anticipated. I'd built solid relationships with dozens of manufacturers and had a growing list of retail clients who trusted my sourcing ability. But more importantly, I started identifying gaps in the market and developing my own proprietary products. I noticed that certain categories were underserved. Simple things that could be manufactured cheaply but sold for excellent margins because nobody was paying attention to them. Kitchen gadgets that solve specific problems, organizational tools for small spaces, fitness accessories that were overpriced in traditional retail. My first proprietary product was a modular closet organization system that I designed after seeing how poorly organized my clients' storage spaces were. The product cost $3.50 to manufacture in China, but solved a real problem that people were willing to pay $29.99 to fix. I moved 50,000 units in the first 6 months through a combination of online sales and retail partnerships. The profit margins were incredible. After manufacturing costs, shipping, and marketing expenses, I was netting about $18 per unit. That first product alone generated over $900,000 in profit. I reinvested everything into better products, larger orders, more sophisticated marketing strategies, and inventory management systems. The business grew from $5,000 a month to $30,000 a month to $85,000 a month. By early 2018, I was pulling in over $200,000 per month between various product lines and still growing rapidly. But I continued to look like a broke graduate student who couldn't get her life together. Family dinners became increasingly painful as my apparent failure contrasted with everyone else's conventional success. Jack had married Lisa in a lavish ceremony at the Four Seasons Scottsdale that probably cost $80,000. They bought a $650,000 house in Paradise Valley with a pool, 3-car garage, and mountain views. Jessica and Derek upgraded to a bigger place in Ahwatukee and started talking seriously about having children and building generational wealth. Everyone was moving forward with their lives, while apparently I was stuck in permanent adolescence. "We're worried about you," my dad said during one particularly uncomfortable dinner. "You're 27 years old and still living like you're in college. When are you going to get serious about your career and start building something meaningful?" "I'm working on some projects," I said vaguely, which was technically true, but deliberately misleading. "Projects," Derek scoffed, setting down his glass of expensive sparkling water. "That's code for unemployed. You need to get back into corporate America, build a real resume, start networking with professionals." "Maybe Jack was right," Jessica added, not even trying to be subtle. "Maybe you just don't have what it takes to really succeed in business." The irony was killing me. I was sitting there listening to people making $60,000 to $120,000 lecture me about success while I was generating more revenue in a month than they made in a year. But I kept my mouth shut and played the role of the family disappointment. Christmas 2018 was particularly brutal. My parents sat me down for what they called a life intervention. They were genuinely concerned about my future and wanted to help me get back on track before it was too late. My dad offered me a job at Chen & Associates for $38,000 per year, doing basic bookkeeping and tax preparation. "It's not much," he said apologetically, "but it's steady work with benefits, and you could learn the accounting business from the ground up. Maybe eventually become a CPA." "Thanks, but I'm good," I said. "Shirley, you're almost 30, my mom said, her voice heavy with disappointment. "You can't keep living like this indefinitely. What happens when you want to get married and start a family? No man is going to want to be with someone who has no ambition or stability." "Like Jack," Jessica added helpfully, as if I needed the reminder. I looked around the room at my family, my parents in their comfortable middle-class home, Derek in his expensive sweater, talking about his latest investment strategy, Jessica, with her new diamond earrings discussing their vacation plans, all of them completely convinced that I was the family failure who needed their pity and intervention. "I'll think about it," I lied, knowing that my business had generated more profit that month than my dad's entire firm. The contempt was getting harder to hide. Derek started making jokes about my career in front of extended family. Jessica would change the subject whenever anyone asked about me. My parents stopped mentioning me to their friends and neighbors. During one family gathering, I overheard my mom talking to my Aunt Sarah about her children's accomplishments. "Jessica and Derek are doing so well," my mom said. "They're looking at houses in Scottsdale and thinking about starting a family. Derek just got another promotion." "What about Shirley?" my aunt asked. My mom paused. "Shirley is finding herself. She's always been different. The pain of being written off by your own family is hard to describe. Every achievement in my secret business life was shadowed by the knowledge that the people who should be proudest had no idea and probably wouldn't believe it if they did know. But I used that pain as fuel. Every condescending comment, every disappointed look, every family gathering where I was treated like the charity case just made me more determined to build something so big that they'd have no choice but to acknowledge it. By 2020, I was worth about $12 million, but my lifestyle hadn't changed at all. My product business was consistently doing $300,000 a month. I'd started investing in real estate using creative financing strategies and had launched 3 additional product lines targeting different market segments. I owned 6 rental properties across Phoenix and Tucson that were generating another $18,000 a month in passive income. My investment portfolio included index funds, individual stocks, and some cryptocurrency that I'd bought when Bitcoin was still under 4,000. But I still lived in the same terrible studio apartment and drove the same beat-up Honda Civic. The cognitive dissonance was surreal. I'd spend my mornings reviewing financial statements showing seven-figure monthly revenues, then drive to family gatherings in my dented car, wearing clothes from Target clearance racks. The pandemic actually accelerated my business growth in unexpected ways. Everyone was buying products online, supply chains were disrupted, and small businesses needed reliable sourcing partners more than ever. My experience with international manufacturers meant I could keep inventory flowing when other companies couldn't get products. Revenue doubled, then tripled. By 2021, I was worth $28 million, and my monthly income was approaching $500,000. My family's attitude toward me had evolved from sympathy to frustration to outright embarrassment. They'd moved past worrying about me to being actively ashamed of my apparent failures. "I don't know what to tell people anymore," my mom confided to Jessica during a phone call that I overheard. "Mrs. Patterson asked about Shirley at book club, and I had to pretend she was exploring different opportunities or something equally vague." "Maybe it's time for some tough love," Derek suggested during one family dinner. "Cut her off financially, force her to grow up and take responsibility." "We're not giving her money," my dad protested. "No, but you pay for her phone. You invite her to family vacations. You include her in family events," Derek replied. "You're enabling this lifestyle. Sometimes people need to hit rock bottom before they make real changes." This was particularly rich coming from someone whose parents had paid for his MBA and given him a $50,000 down payment on his first house. But Derek had convinced himself that his success was entirely self-made. The breaking point came in March 2022 at Jessica's 30th birthday party. It was held at some upscale restaurant in Old Town Scottsdale called The Mission, the kind of place where appetizers cost $22 and the ambiance is more important than the food. The restaurant had exposed brick walls, dim lighting from expensive fixtures, and servers who acted like they were doing you a favor by taking your order. Everyone was dressed in business casual or cocktail attire, sipping craft cocktails that cost $16 each. Jack was there with Lisa, looking exactly the same as he had in college. Perfect hair, perfect smile, dressed to impress. Lisa looked elegant in a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. They were the picture of the successful couple. I showed up in jeans and a t-shirt because I honestly didn't own anything nicer despite being able to afford the most expensive clothes in the city. I mean, I could have bought the entire restaurant chain, but they didn't know that. Jack made a deliberate point of coming over to say hello, probably out of some combination of curiosity and pity. "Shirley, oh my goodness, how are you?" He gave me the kind of hug you give someone at a funeral. Brief, awkward, and full of sympathy. "I'm doing well," I said simply. "That's great. You look—" He paused, taking in my discount store appearance. "Exactly the same as college." Lisa appeared beside him, her diamond bracelet catching the light. "Shirley, it's been ages. How's everything going?" "Can't complain," I said. "That's awesome," Jack said. "You know, if you ever want to get into something real with growth potential, I could always use a good administrative assistant. The marketing world is brutal, but I could teach you a lot." I smiled politely. "Thanks. I'll keep that in mind." Lisa touched my arm in that condescending way that wealthy people use with poor relatives. "It's so great that you're staying positive and keeping your chin up. Not everyone is cut out for big success, and that's perfectly okay. Some people are just meant to be workers, not leaders," Jack added, nodding sagely. "Nothing wrong with that. The world needs all types." They walked away, probably thinking they'd done their good deed for the day by acknowledging the family charity case who never got her life together. But watching them walk away, Jack in his designer suit and Lisa with her carefully curated elegance, I realized that I was done hiding. Done pretending to be something I wasn't. Done letting people who had accomplished far less than me treat me like a failure. That's when I decided it was time for the reveal. The next morning, I called my dad and asked him to organize a family dinner for the following weekend. I told him I had some important news to share and wanted everyone there. "Good news, I hope," he said, probably expecting me to announce that I'd finally gotten a real job, or maybe found a boyfriend who was willing to date down. "Life-changing news," I replied cryptically. Saturday night, everyone gathered at my parents' house. Jessica and Derek, my parents, even my cousin Mike, who happened to be visiting from Tucson. I'd specifically asked my dad to invite Jack and Lisa, which confused him, but he did it anyway. "Why them?" he asked. Trust me, you'll understand. I showed up in the same beat-up Honda Civic wearing jeans and a polo shirt I'd had since college. Everyone was already there making small talk and drinking sodas, probably wondering what kind of announcement the family failure could possibly have to make. The dining room felt familiar but different. I was seeing it through the eyes of someone who could buy and sell everything in the room without thinking twice about the cost. "Okay, Shirley," my dad said once we'd all sat down around the mahogany table. "You said you had news to share with everyone." Instead of making a speech, I pulled out my phone and opened my primary business banking app. Without saying anything, I handed it to my dad. He looked at the screen showing the account balance. His expression changed completely. He blinked, looked again, then set the phone down very carefully, like it might explode. "What is it?" my mom asked, leaning forward with curiosity. "The balance," my dad said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "It says $47.3 million. Complete silence. You could have heard a pin drop. "That's impossible," Derek said, grabbing the phone with shaking hands. "This has to be fake, some kind of app that lets you put in fake numbers." I pulled out my laptop and logged into my business dashboard, which showed real-time revenue, profit margins, inventory levels, and financial projections. The current month's revenue was $847,000 and climbing. "This is my company," I said calmly, enjoying the shocked faces around the table. "I've been building it for 6 years, while you all thought I was failing at life." More silence. Jack was staring at the laptop screen like it was written in ancient hieroglyphics. Lisa had gone completely pale and was gripping her wine glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. "But your apartment," Jessica said weakly, her voice barely audible. "You live in that terrible studio." "I own that building now," I replied matter-of-factly. "Bought it last year for $2.3 million cash. Seemed like a good investment property." "The car! I like that car. It's paid off, reliable, and draws zero attention. But I also own a Tesla Model S Plaid and a Porsche 911 Turbo. They're in a climate-controlled garage across town along with a few other vehicles." My mom was the first to recover her ability to speak. "Shirley, honey, why didn't you tell us any of this?" I looked around the room at each person individually before answering. "Because I wanted to see how you'd treat me when you thought I had nothing. And it turns out not very well." I stood up slowly and looked at each person around the table. "Derek," I said, making direct eye contact, "you offered me a job as an administrative assistant making probably $35,000 a year. My company generates more profit in a week than you make in a year." Derek's face was bright red, and he couldn't meet my eyes. "Jack," I continued, turning to my ex-boyfriend, who was still staring at the laptop screen, "you left me because I had no ambition and couldn't provide the lifestyle you wanted. I'm now worth more than your dad's entire dealership chain." Jack swallowed hard, his face drained of color. Lisa's lips parted, but no words came out. "Jessica," I said, looking at my sister, "you've spent years telling people I was the family disappointment. Turns out I'm the only millionaire in this room. Actually, multi-millionaire." "Mom, Dad," I said finally, "you were embarrassed to tell people about me. You offered me a $38,000 job out of pity. I'm 31 years old and financially independent for life." The room remained completely silent. "So here's what's going to happen," I continued, enjoying every second of their shock. "I'm moving to California next month. I bought a house in Palo Alto for $8.2 million cash. I'm expanding my business nationally and looking at some acquisition opportunities." I picked up my phone and laptop and headed toward the door. "Jack, Lisa," I said, pausing at the entrance to the dining room, "thanks for showing me exactly what kind of people you really are. That lesson was worth millions to me." "Jessica, Derek," I continued, "enjoy your mortgage payments, car loans, and middle-class lifestyle. Try not to give too much unsolicited advice to people who are actually successful." "Mom, Dad," I said finally, "maybe next time don't judge your daughter based on appearances. Some of us prefer to build wealth quietly rather than show off." I started to leave, then turned back one more time. "Oh, and Derek, that scarcity mindset you diagnosed me with? Turns out it was actually strategic patience. You should look into it." And with that, I walked out the door, got into my beat-up Honda Civic, and drove away from the most satisfying moment of my entire life. The phone calls started exactly 48 hours later like clockwork. First was Jessica, her voice shaky and apologetic. "Shirley, I'm so sorry. I had no idea what you were building. Can we please talk?" Then Derek, trying to sound casual and professional. "Hey, I was completely out of line. I'd love to discuss some potential investment opportunities with you if you're interested." My parents called together on speakerphone. "We're so proud of you, daughter. We always knew you were special and would find your way." But the most entertaining call came from Jack 3 days later. "Shirley, it's me. I've been thinking nonstop about what happened at dinner, and I realize I made a huge mistake years ago. Lisa and I are having some serious problems, and I keep thinking about us and how good we were together." "Are you divorced?" I asked bluntly. "Well, no, not yet, but we're definitely having issues, and—" "Call me when you are. Actually, don't call me at all." "Shirley, please listen. I was young and stupid and short-sighted. I didn't understand what you were building or how successful you'd become. We could be so amazing together now." "You're right about one thing," I said. "You were young and stupid. The problem is, you're still stupid. You're just not young anymore." And I hung up. Jack, called the next day asking if there were any job opportunities at my company. Jessica asked for help with their down payment on a bigger house. Derek wanted to discuss synergistic business partnerships and mutually beneficial investment strategies. My parents were the most persistent, calling every few days to check in and casually mention various family financial pressures. Jessica's student loans were becoming overwhelming. Derek's credit card debt was higher than they'd realized. My cousin Mike had some medical bills that insurance didn't cover. Last week, Jack called again, this time crying. Apparently, Lisa's spending habits combined with some poor investments had put them in a financial tailspin. His marketing business wasn't doing well, and they were 3 months behind on their mortgage. "Could you help us out, for old time's sake?" he asked, his voice breaking. "For old time's sake?" I repeated. "Absolutely not." And I hung up. I've gotten used to saying no now. No to Derek's business ideas. No to Jessica's hints about tuition funds for her future kids. No to my parents' suggestions that it would be nice if I contributed to a family vacation. And especially no to Jack and Lisa. It's amazing how quickly people change their tune when they realize the failure they pitied is the most successful person they know. The same people who called me lazy, unmotivated, and a disappointment are now tripping over themselves to get a piece of what I've built. But I remember every lecture, every smirk, every time they told me to lower my standards. I remember my mom saying Jack was good for me, my dad offering me a pity job, Jessica sneering that I was out of my ex's league, Derek diagnosing me with a scarcity mindset. I remember Jack laughing in my face and choosing Lisa because she came from money. I remember all of it. And that's why, for the first time in my life, I'm choosing myself. My $47 million empire didn't come from luck, handouts, or family connections. It came from grinding in silence while everyone else wrote me off. It came from believing in myself when nobody else did. It came from refusing to let their judgment define me. They want forgiveness, they want access, they want money. What they're going to get is distance. Because I built this life without them, and I'm damn sure going to enjoy it without them too.